Hello everyone, Marie Burns here. I'd like to visit with you a little bit today about the topic of expenses. It's also one of the chapters in my Before Financial Checklist book, but it's something that comes to mind, or should come to mind perhaps, whenever we read articles or have discussions that center around the question, do you know your number? Because that is really asking you to think about your retirement nest egg value. Specifically, how much do you need to have stashed away before you can retire and not have to worry about running out of money? I always feel like a politician when I answer that question with the phrase, it depends. But in my experience as a certified financial planner, the number that you really need to know, even before estimating your retirement nest egg value, is the answer to how much do you need, want, both, to spend annually in retirement. In my financial planning and investment management practice, I've worked with clients that have, on the one side, no trouble living on, say, $50,000 a year. And then on the other side, those that struggle to live on $200,000 a year. So you can see how very different the nest egg goal number would be for each of them. Our lifestyle definitely determines our spending needs. And one of the biggest factors, in addition to our life expectancy, is our lifestyle in determining whether or not we're likely to run out of money in retirement, because it's really a lot about spending. Yet in talking with folks over the last 20 years, most people often don't know, without spending time calculating it, what their typical expense amount is each month. But when people are willing to look closer at determining that number, I do encourage them to think about breaking those expenses down into two categories: the wants expenses and the needs expenses. The needs are those costs in your budget that you have to pay in order to provide food, shelter, and transportation for yourself and or your family. So what has to go out of the bank account each month without doing anything extra or fun? Things like utilities, gas, groceries, mortgage or rent, insurances. And the importance of maintaining your health is also why I firmly believe that those costs, the costs that are involved with whatever you enjoy for exercise, whether it's a health club cost, or you like golfing, or you need good shoes for doing a lot of walking or running, those also should belong in that need category. Wants, on the other hand, those are what they call those discretionary expenses that you really might enjoy, but you also know that you could cut back on them if you needed to save money or have more money to invest or to reduce your spending. A big common one is you could eat out less, for example, or maybe shop less or spend less on expensive clothing, for example. One of my favorite lines from Dave Ramsey, who's the creator of, you might have heard, the Financial Peace University class, is to be sure you tell your money where to go instead of wondering where your money went. In other words, we have to be aware of our income as well as our expenses so we can avoid that stress of living paycheck to paycheck, and also be able to put away money for short-term emergencies as well as these long-term goals like our retirement nest egg. Which brings us to the B word, budget. Nobody likes that word. Nobody likes to do the tracking and monitoring of our spending, especially on a regular basis, for a variety of reasons. It takes time, at least initially, to track or monitor your expenses. It might not be our favorite thing to do with our time. Or perhaps we find thinking about money in general stressful. Or maybe we know we don't like or won't like what we're going to find when we do that tracking. Maybe too much money is being spent on the wants versus the needs, for example. Or there's that too much month left at the end of the money. Or we're going to find out there's not enough activity in the areas of saving and investing. So it's not what we want to find out after spending all this time. But like most things in life, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to tackling the budget issue. At least initially, you do need to identify your categories and typical amounts involved in your spending habits, And you could do that manually. You could handwrite your expenses as you spend and pay those bills, or certainly there are several expense tracking sheets available online. So you could do it electronically, or you could just download what's being spent right out of your bank and credit cards. Or you can use a tracking service that kind of downloads and categorizes it for you, like mint.com, for example. But what I found is just the experience, the initial experience of going through the process of determining what your average monthly spending amount is, that is often eye-opening and more valuable than even whether or not you continue tracking it going forward. So if you can take an average of what happened over typically a period of 3 months, that often gives you a good ballpark figure to start with. And it's a huge bonus of actually documenting your expenses when you have it written down, so that in the what if instance you end up not at home, you're in the hospital, or somehow for whatever reason unable to take care of those expenses, you're now not leaving some family members in the lurch if somebody needs to step in and help you and take your place in paying those bills down the road. You've kind of taken the detective work out of it for them by maintaining a list of the common household expenses. So once you see where the money went, now what? If you're still working, you want to be sure you're also saving, unless maybe you've already accumulated that guideline of 3 to 6 months of expenses already stashed away in a savings type of account, so it can't go down in value. And you also need to look at investing. 10 to 20% is the guideline of your income, 10 to 20% as part of your monthly need. You have to treat those like needs. This is part of Dave Ramsey's tell your money where to go advice. And if you can automate both the saving and the investing, that is truly the best way to take the emotion out of the decision. That way you're not deciding every month how to do it, if to do it, how much to do, and you can kind of overcome that human inertia issue of not acting on your goals. So setting up automatic transfers from checking to savings, or from your paycheck to your 401k, for example, that guarantees that you're going to pay yourself first. Or if you're not working anymore, no more earned income, maybe you're semi-retired or retired, you might need to have more of a focus on the expense side, cutting back on, or at least being aware of those want expenses. And sometimes keeping it simple is the most helpful. The cash envelope approach, for example, can be one way that you target just 2 or 3 spending habits typically that you need to try to cut back on. One couple I know put $200 in an envelope each month as their eating out budget. And when it was gone, they knew they were done eating out for that month. They did the same thing for spending on extra things for their kids. We can get carried away thinking it's not spending on us, it's spending on somebody else. But that way they weren't having to track every expense every month, but they also knew that they were working on the 2 areas that they knew historically put them over their monthly ballpark budget. Another couple preferred to break it down to knowing their weekly want spending limit. And if they could keep their weekly splurges on any category, not related to food, shelter, or transportation, to less than $100 in their case, they knew they were staying pretty close to their identified budget. Both, however, also put the pay yourself first expenses on autopilot, that automatic sweep from checking to savings and from the paycheck to the 401k as part of their monthly need expenses. So they could identify those dollar limits and then for spending, regardless of which tracking method they used. Getting financially organized forces you to look at your financial health a little closer. This is often a great starting point, whether that leads you to more budget work or maybe something else. But knowing your numbers allows you to treat yourself to your best financial health today. And it pays huge dividends in so many ways later in life.